When Philip Johnson stood in the Guggenheim Museum Bilbao back in 1998 and broke down in tears, calling Frank Gehry the greatest architect alive, nobody could have predicted what would happen next. That building didn't just change architecture, it changed an entire city's economy, pulling in $500 million every single year. But here's the twist that's sending shockwaves through the design world right now. Gehry's last words about architecture weren't about buildings at all, and what insiders are revealing about his final days is making everyone question everything they thought they knew about this titan who just passed away at 96. The secrets he took with him, the projects left unfinished, and the cryptic message that's now going viral, wait until you hear what his closest collaborators are finally admitting. Frank Gehry passed away Friday at his Santa Monica home after a brief respiratory illness, but the timing of his death has sparked intense speculation across the architecture community. Here's what nobody's talking about. Just weeks before his passing, Gehry was still working on multiple projects, including the Guggenheim Abu Dhabi that's supposed to open later this year. Sources close to his firm are now scrambling to figure out what happens to these unfinished visions, and the drama behind the scenes is absolutely wild. Born Frank Owen Goldberg in Toronto in 1929 to Polish immigrant parents, this man completely revolutionized what buildings could look like, turning metal and glass into living sculptures that defied every rule in the book. But the Gehry story gets darker when you dig into his early struggles. Picture this, a young architect in Los Angeles during the 1960s, completely broke, buying a tiny bungalow in Santa Monica for practically nothing. What he did next became legendary. He wrapped chain-link fencing and corrugated metal around that modest house, creating something so controversial that neighbors literally wanted him gone. People thought he was insane, using materials like cinder blocks, plywood, and chain-link fencing for a home renovation. The backlash was brutal, but that rejection fueled something in Gehry that would eventually make him untouchable. That house, the one everyone mocked, became the blueprint for a new architectural language that would dominate the next 5 decades.
The Bilbao Effect changed everything. When that Guggenheim opened in 1997, critics were absolutely stunned. Philip Johnson, the godfather of American modern architecture, was moved to tears in the atrium. And suddenly, Gehry wasn't just famous, he was a phenomenon. Every city on Earth wanted their own Gehry building, their own titanium masterpiece that would transform their skyline and bring in tourist dollars. But here's what's fascinating. Gehry refused to copy himself. While everyone begged him for another Bilbao, he kept pushing forward, experimenting with new forms, new materials, new impossibilities. His biographer, Paul Goldberger, revealed something shocking about Gehry's personality. Despite being one of history's greatest artists, he desperately craved approval and worried constantly about whether people loved his work. The Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles became another defining moment, though it came with serious controversy. Critics called it broken crockery, mocking its fragmented appearance and unconventional curves. The Eisenhower family even publicly objected to Gehry's bold proposal for a presidential memorial, calling his designs too showy, too attention-seeking. But Gehry never backed down. He kept creating buildings that seemed to move, that felt alive, that challenged everything we thought architecture should be. Using software originally designed for fighter jets, he sculpted structures that looked like they might take flight at any moment, swirling and swooping in ways that seemed to defy gravity itself.
The Toronto connection adds another layer to this story that's now making headlines. Gehry's redesign of the Art Gallery of Ontario in 2008 drew harsh criticism from Torontonians when models were unveiled, and his plans for residential skyscrapers in the city's entertainment district went through multiple controversial redesigns. People in his hometown weren't automatically sold on his genius. They questioned him, criticized him, demanded changes. But Gehry had learned something crucial from the Bilbao experience, where locals initially wanted to run him out of town before that building brought them hundreds of millions in annual revenue. He knew that groundbreaking architecture always faces resistance before acceptance, and he was willing to endure that fire. Behind the titanium and the curves, there was a deeply personal side to Gehry that's only now being revealed. As a child, he watched carp swimming in his grandmother's bathtub every Thursday before they became gefilte fish, and those fish stayed with him his entire life, inspiring his famous fish sculptures and the organic flowing forms that became his signature. His grandmother Leah used to build little cities with him using scraps of wood from her husband's hardware store, entertaining him for hours on the living room floor. That childhood creativity, that sense of play and experimentation never left him. Even in his 90s, Gehry was designing everything from handbags for Louis Vuitton to watch faces, refusing to slow down or retire gracefully like most architects his age. The phrase everyone's now obsessing over is his cryptic line that's going viral across social media. "We're not just building buildings, we're building places." That line is being scrutinized and re-examined as people try to understand what Gehry really meant about architecture's deeper purpose. Was he talking about community, about emotion, about the way spaces can transform human experience? Insiders who worked with him say he believed buildings should make people feel something profound, that architecture wasn't just about shelter or function, but about lifting the human spirit and creating moments of wonder. Bernard Arnault, the billionaire CEO of LVMH, who collaborated with Gehry on multiple projects, including the stunning Louis Vuitton Foundation in Paris, called him a dear friend and described their partnership as one of the most intense creative relationships of his life. Arnault said Gehry would remain a genius of lightness, transparency, and grace, words that captured the paradox of Gehry's work. Buildings made of heavy materials that somehow felt weightless and ethereal. Nancy Pelosi praised his contributions to global visual culture, calling him a gentleman titan who left an indelible mark not just through his designs, but through his incredible generosity and advocacy for arts education. What people don't realize is how Gehry's personal life intersected with his professional triumphs and tragedies. He married Anita Snyder in 1952, they divorced in 1966, and he married Berta Aguilera in 1975. His daughter Leslie Gehry Brenner died of cancer in 2008, a devastating loss that those close to him say profoundly affected his worldview. He was known for his occasional temper, famously flipping off a reporter at a press conference in Oviedo who accused him of being showy. That moment went viral, showing a side of Gehry that was raw, unfiltered, and refreshingly human. He wasn't some untouchable genius floating above criticism. He was a man who fought back, who defended his vision, who refused to apologize for being bold. The awards and recognition tell only part of the story. Gehry won the Pritzker Architecture Prize in 1989, considered the field's highest honor, and was compared to Picasso in his citation for always experimenting and refusing to be bound by critical acceptance or commercial success. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Barack Obama, who said Gehry taught us that buildings can lift our spirits and broaden our horizons. The AIA Gold Medal, the National Medal of Arts, dozens of honorary degrees, these accolades piled up year after year. But when he accepted the AIA Gold Medal in 1999, surrounded by architectural legends like Philip Johnson, Robert Venturi, and Michael Graves, his response revealed everything. "It's like finding out my big brothers love me after all." That desperate need for validation, for love, for acceptance, it drove him to create bolder and bolder works throughout his 8-decade career. The impact of Gehry's death is rippling through the design world in unexpected ways. His firm, Gehry Partners, now faces the challenge of completing projects he was actively involved in, and questions are swirling about whether anyone can truly finish a Frank Gehry building without Frank Gehry. The Guggenheim Abu Dhabi project, scheduled to open soon, represents one of his final visions, but insiders wonder if the finished product will truly capture his intentions.
There's also the matter of his residential complex projects in downtown Los Angeles, ambitious developments that were supposed to redefine urban living with his signature style. What happens to those dreams now? Beyond the buildings, Gehry's furniture designs remain influential, particularly his wiggle chair made from cardboard, still considered one of the 20th century's most innovative chair designs. He approached furniture the same way he approached architecture, with a willingness to experiment with unconventional materials and challenge assumptions about what was possible. His sailing yacht, Foggy, his involvement with ice hockey through his FOG league in the office, his membership in the California Yacht Club, these details paint a picture of a man who brought the same creative energy to his leisure activities that he brought to his professional work. The Bilbao Effect, the phenomenon where a single building can transform an entire city's economy and cultural identity, stands as Gehry's most lasting contribution to urban planning theory. That Guggenheim didn't just put Bilbao on the map, it created a template that cities around the world tried to replicate, commissioning architects to design landmark buildings that would attract tourists and investment. Some succeeded, many failed, but the attempt itself showed how completely Gehry had changed the conversation about what architecture could do for a city. He proved that buildings could be economic engines, cultural statements, and works of art simultaneously.
Looking at his body of work now, from those early California projects like Santa Monica Place and the Norton House, to global landmarks like the DZ Bank Building in Berlin and the whimsical dancing house in Prague nicknamed Fred and Ginger, a pattern emerges. Gehry was always pushing against resistance, always doing the thing people said couldn't be done, always choosing the bold option over the safe one. His philosophy, developed in reaction to postmodernism, created a visual language that became synonymous with contemporary architecture itself. When people around the world picture modern architecture, they often picture something that looks like a Frank Gehry building, even if they don't know his name. The final chapter of Gehry's story is still being written by the people whose lives he touched, students he inspired, architects he mentored, cities he transformed. All of them are now grappling with a world where Frank Gehry is no longer creating new wonders. His death marks the end of an era, the closing of a chapter in architectural history that future generations will study and debate. But his buildings remain, titanium waves frozen in time, concrete curves that still seem to move, spaces that continue to lift spirits and broaden horizons, exactly as he intended. The man who started by building imaginary cities on his grandmother's floor with scraps of wood ended up reshaping real cities around the globe, leaving behind a legacy that proved architecture could be adventurous, emotional, and transformative all at once.